We're doing an episode of History Explorers. I know we haven't done one for a while. And today we're going to talk about
Frida Kahlo.
Frida Kahlo. And actually we started talking about her because we were doing a project at Girl Scouts where we had to pick a role model. And Stella couldn't think of one. And I don't know if anyone knows this. Stella is an artist. Very good, talented artist. And so eventually I suggested Frida Kahlo. And we looked at pictures of her and pictures she'd done, and she drew a really cool picture of Frida. So I thought it would be fun for us to talk about her, because Frida was cool for many reasons. So we did some research. Frida.
Well, you did.
Yes, but we're going to talk about it. She was a famous artist from Mexico. She was born in 1907, and she died in 1954. What do you want to say?
So she is a famous artist from Mexico. She was born in 1907 and she died in 1954. She was 6 years old. She got
Polio.
And it
took her years to recover. Right. Polio is a disease we don't get anymore because now we have the polio vaccine. It's one of the shots you get when you and your sister go to the doctor. Thank goodness, because polio...
Is it in the flu shot?
No. It's one of the other shots you get. So polio, it goes into your bones and it paralyzes you. So she had a bad leg and it actually bothered her for the rest of her life, even though she recovered.
Around 18 years old, she was in a
bad
bus accident. So she had to stay in bed to recover. And she taught herself to paint to pass the time. She studied from some art
books
her father had.
So she was self-taught. Who else is self-taught?
Me.
This girl right here, who looks at books and copies things and is self-taught, because you know who's not an artist? Yeah. So, so she was in a really bad accident when she was 18 years old, a bus accident, which would change her life. And she was in bed for a long time.
How many years?
Off and on. She was in bed for 3 months, and then I think she had surgery and then was in bed for another 9 months. So not even a full year, but it affected her life for the rest of her life, and she would have to stay in bed off and on. So she started painting, and they actually set up her bed so that she was in a metal corset some of the time.
And what's a corset?
To keep your back straight. And they set up an easel so she could paint. And then she actually had a mirror put on the ceiling so she could see herself and paint herself, because she was famous for her self-portraits. So that was pretty cool.
She grew up
during
the Mexican Revolution.
Right.
In 1910, the Mexican people
rebelled
against the Mexican government to make things more fair for people.
They wanted
land, freedom
for peasants.
What are peasants?
Peasants are like the lowest class of people, poor people.
Oh, for the peasants.
Communal
land rights for
agriculture.
Why
did they want land? What do you need land for?
Houses.
Living. What else? They couldn't go to Vaughn's.
Refrigerators.
No.
To store the food.
To grow food. You need land to grow food. So if you're really poor and you don't have land, then you starve. Right.
Oh.
Frida also really liked being different. She cut her hair short at one point, and she sometimes wore men's clothes. She was super cute. I'll get a picture of her in a minute.
When she painted in bed, she put a mirror on the ceiling so she could paint herself.
Right. She was inspired by revolutionary art, and she painted, or she was inspired by murals, right? So the big pictures, right? She drew pictures of her family, her friends, animals, and herself, because it was the easiest to see herself. She said that she painted life as she experienced it, and that she was the person she knew best.
Her paint
Her paintings?
Her paintings showed her thoughts and images that
were in her head.
And your handwriting.
I know, I didn't think you were going to read it. That were in her head and how she felt about her body. Because what was up with her body? It was all broken, right?
Oh.
Yeah, so she got out a lot of her feelings about her body through her paintings. Frida married Diego Rivera,
who was also an artist who painted revolutionary art. He painted murals.
For a while they lived in the United States, but Frida wanted to go back to Mexico.
She dressed in a traditional Mexican clothing. She was
also bisexual and had both boyfriends and girlfriends.
She and Diego
divorced
and then remarried, but Frida insisted on
her own independence.
She became a professor of painting at the Mexican School of Painting and Sculpture.
Right. So they actually lived in two separate houses for a while. One, I think Diego's was pink and hers was blue. She lived in a blue house, which is also funny because it's kind of the reverse of the colors.
Reverse.
You think of boys being blue and girls being pink. She was like, nuh-uh, on the blue house. Right. So they divorced. He had many affairs. She had other lovers. They divorced. They ended up remarrying, but she was like, I need my own money and my own house, and that's how they did it after that.
Diego was a
communist,
and Frida joined the Mexican
Communist
Party. Communists believed that the nation's
wealth should be
shared equally among the people.
Right. Trotsky, a communist leader of the Soviet Union, was expelled by Stalin at this time, and he was actually granted asylum in Mexico, in part because Diego was helping him. And so he came to Mexico. He fell in love with Frida, and so they had a bit of an affair.
What's an affair?
That's where they like each other and they're boyfriend girlfriend. They write notes back and forth. He wrote notes to her and put them in books she would find and stuff. People wanted to kill Trotsky.
Why?
Because Stalin was in charge in the Soviet Union.
Wait, who's Trotsky?
Trotsky was the famous communist who came over from the Soviet Union. And Stalin was in charge of the Soviet Union and wanted Trotsky dead. Because Stalin wanted to be the only guy in charge. Stalin was a communist, but he wasn't a very good one. He killed anyone he didn't like. So that's not a good thing. So since Diego and Frida were friends with Trotsky and helping him, they were also in danger.
Yeah.
Since Trotsky was in danger, right? And in 1940...
Trotsky was eventually stabbed and murdered in Mexico.
Right.
Frida and her sister were put in jail for a couple of
days
while they were questioned by police.
Right. So they were actually put in jail for a couple of days, and they
Why?
were interrogated because they were trying to find out what happened to Trotsky. It was like a mystery, right?
Oh.
Trotsky was stabbed and murdered. Eventually they were let go.
But the
imprisonment was not good for her health. Right, so she already had all these health issues with her body, and then she was put in jail and interrogated, and it just was not good for her. So, because of her bus accident, Frida's bones had never really healed properly. So she was often in pain. Even when she was out with Diego, traveling to the United States, painting, she was still in a lot of pain and would often be sick. She had several surgeries, and she painted pictures of her body, split open and what it looked like in her torso to help her deal with it. Towards the end of her life, she actually attended an exhibit of her work on a bed. So she didn't think she'd be able to go because she was so sick and broken. And then she was like, maybe I could just go in an ambulance. And so they took her there in an ambulance, and then they had a bed for her to lay in so she could be there for her exhibit. It's pretty amazing, right?
Wow.
One of her legs, remember she had a bad leg, one of her legs eventually had to be amputated, which
What
means
does that mean?
cut off. The doctors had to cut it off. They put you to sleep while they do it.
Oh.
But she was heartbroken, of course,
Why?
eventually because she lost her leg.
Oh.
Yeah. Eventually she learned to walk with an artificial leg.
What does that mean?
So it's like a leg or part of her leg made out of plastic. And it fits on your
Like, do you have to walk
knee.
like this?
No, you can move your knee. It's just a little uncomfortable and you have to kind of learn how to do it, you know, with practice and stuff. And then she attended, towards the end of her life, she attended communist rallies in a wheelchair. I think she eventually got pneumonia and she died in 1954.
They
Draped.
draped her coffin with a communist flag.
Right. And they're actually, some friends of hers came and draped it with a communist flag. And an official at the funeral was supposed to take it off or make them take it off. Diego wanted it left on, and the guy, I forget who it was like, didn't make Diego take it off, and he was actually eventually fired from his job because he didn't make them take off the communist flag. So that's kind of interesting. Do you want to look at some pictures?
Yeah.
So here's a picture this is a photograph of Frida.
She's pretty.
She's beautiful. And, oh, here is a picture of her dressed up like a man.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that
Look at
interesting?
that. Don't look at this one. Look at this one.
So she has her short hair and she's dressed in a suit and tie.
Alright.
She liked to be different. This was a pencil drawing she drew of the bus accident. So that's her on a stretcher, and that's the bus crashing.
Ooh, I want to see that. It looks very...
See?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, I want to look at this some more.
We can look at it more later, too.
Wow.
You can tell it was a very traumatic part of her life.
The bus go like, whoop!
I don't think it went in the air, but they crashed.
Oh.
Here's a picture of her where you can see the inside of her body. So you can see
Yeah, I
she.
can see that.
Okay, hold on. She drew. You can see her hearts, and she's actually holding her own hand. Kind of cool.
Wait.
The two Fridas. They're both her.
Ah.
And see, they're like connected with a vein in between them. Those are her heart. Here's a picture of her dressed as a man. Again.
Is her dressed as a man? And here's like a portrait of her. Did she draw that?
Yep.
Okay.
Here she is in bed in traction. And they have that easel. They made that special easel for her so she could paint while she's laying down.
Where's the mirror?
It's above her.
Show the...
So that's how she did it.
It's amazing.
Can you imagine? I probably would have just laid there and cried. And here's some of her art. This is a
kitties?
self-portrait. Those are monkeys. That's a monkey and that's a cat or a panther. She did a lot. She had lots of pets. She had monkeys and birds and lots. She loved animals. So she apparently also had a pet deer. And she drew her pet deer with her head on it because she's Frida Kahlo. And that's what she does.
Nobody knows.
Is there anything else you want to say, Stella?
That's
it.
That's an amazing picture of fruit
Okay.
right there.
Do you want to say anything about Frida?
Ah!
Why is she your role model?
Because I want to draw like her one day.
Because of her paintings. I like her paintings, and then I also like that she was a communist, and
What's
that...
a communist anyway?
We talk about it. Communists are people who believe that all the riches, all the wealth of a nation, all the money and stuff gets divided up again between everybody. So it's not just a few people who get everything. So I thought it was cool that she was a part of the Communist Party. All right. Thanks for listening. Say bye.
Bye.